Good Saturday, good people. Welcome to another edition of the Breaking Chains Book Club, where we are reading Matthew Perry's Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. And welcome to Cinnamon Girl, my co-reader for these last several weeks. Hello, Cinnamon Girl.
Hello, hello. How are you, Lynn?
Good. I'm glad you can hear me because I was a little worried about it.
Oh, oh yeah. No, I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Because last time I was using this mic setup and all of a sudden it went blank and I didn't.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
But you came back and it's all good.
yeah. So
Did you have a good week?
actually, it's been a pretty good week. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It's been. I don't know why people start sentences out with "I'm not gonna lie." I'm. It's funny. It's just like a figure of speech.
Right.
I'm not a liar, so I don't ever lie. You know what I mean? I'm not one of those people who lies, so I don't know why I would start a sentence out with "I'm not gonna lie." But anyway,
Yeah. Yes.
I think about words a lot. That's why
I do too. Yeah. I do too. Yeah. The meaning behind and how people use them and how, how.
phrases and
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
phrases and stuff like I'm just a nerd.
Or people say, well, if I'm being really honest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It's like,
well, I'm
well,
gonna be honest with you. Well, wait, aren't you always honest?
I know.
What the fuck are
I
you
know.
talking about? But yes,
Yeah.
it was a good week. It was a good week. I took a nice little road trip.
Oh, that's right.
Got to see a little bit of sights. It took me away from YouTube.
Oh, good.
It's always good to take, a little time away from YouTube. I always encourage it despite my, contributions to it. And
Well, your Wade Wilson contribution this week was quite hilarious.
it was that not many people watched it, and it was very seasonal, so I took it
Yeah.
down.
Did you? I was looking for it. I thought, where did that go? I know I watched it.
It was,
Yeah.
the other thing I worry about sometimes is being insensitive to the victims. I really do. I worry about that.
Yeah.
It is a little insensitive, to the victims to make something, to highlight something funny about a killer. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, I get that. And I think it's actually a really good perspective because, on YouTube, everyone's looking for, the views and the most high profile cases. And, certainly Wade Wilson has gotten his fair share of coverage
And
by,
I was trying to make fun of him, really, of his.
well, there's so
He has
much you can make fun of with that guy.
he has such a creepy laugh, and he was made such a fool of.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, he was completely, But the other reason it was a good week, not only that I am in love with how phone calls from prison rolled out.
Me too. Me too.
You get
Yes.
you already know that he was owned, but then you get to see, him doing the excessive pre-celebration,
Oh my gosh.
it's
It is that
already
was
knowing that he was owned.
unbelievable. I mean, the
Yeah.
timing of how they release these conversations is really great
Yeah.
because we already know like what the what happened with all that.
Yeah.
But to get the celebration conversation with Kelly and Jesse and his parents. Oh my gosh, with his parents.
I didn't hear the conversation with his parents, but I
Oh,
heard like the tail end of it. And in all honesty, I almost don't want to hear it because it sounds so sad.
it was heartbreaking. I listened to it a couple of times and his mother just sounds like the dearest woman and his dad, they just sound like really nice people who still love him very much.
Yeah.
And, he's breaking this news that, he's going to be coming home and that,
Right.
so, the Innocence Project is going to save him. And you can hear, in their voices, like, wow, that's amazing. It's so great. But you can also hear how proud he is. He wants to, he's trying to make it better with them. And I could hear the relationship, the son and the mother and the father relationship, which doesn't come through with anything else that you hear from him.
Yeah.
So it was sad. It was sad to me because it showed almost a humanness.
That was my next question, Solo. Do you think the parents knew it was BS? Do you think the parents knew that he was just selling them his own dream of getting out?
I felt that, yes, that was the end result. You could hear them. Of course, they didn't come out and say that, but you could hear the reluctance, the hesitation in their voices, but they wanted to support him, I guess, even though they knew that it was BS.
Right.
Because it was so over the top,
Yeah.
right? It was just so over the top.
They've probably been through this
Through it. Yes.
many times, right?
Yes. Yeah.
This pipe dream that he's selling them, and
Exactly. Yeah.
and they just feel bad for him because they know they took him in from a horrible situation.
Right. Yes. And worn down. I mean, I can only imagine,
Right.
how worn down they feel from dealing with everything that he's put them through as a family.
Right. The other thing that made it kind of a good week for me, I'm not into baseball, but my two boys were raised on baseball, and especially they were raised on the Dodgers.
My boys too, only up here in San Francisco. So, the Giants.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's sort of another thing we have in common, but you're going to laugh at this. Okay. Okay. My ex-husband and I both grew up in LA, but then we raised our boys in San Francisco,
right?
Raised them as Dodger fans.
Oh my gosh. So there, the stigma around that is, because now I was rooting for the Yankees. I have to say, I kind of hate the Dodgers, and I love baseball. I am a big baseball fan, and so are my boys. And when the Dodgers won, we were all like walking around the house with sad faces. Well, it's like anybody but the Dodgers. But I mean, they earned it, and it's
it was fun. I was happy for I'm not a baseball fan, but I am for them. I mean, I went to countless of their games. Both of them were really good players.
Yeah, so were mine. This is so weird. So were mine. They went through the whole.
They might have played.
Yeah, could be. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
How old are your boys?
Well, they're old, so they're 27 and 30.
Oh, okay. So mine are a little bit younger.
Yeah. You're still in school, right? They're still in college.
They're both in college.
Yeah. So about 10 years or 8 years behind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so my older son is at UCLA, so he went to the parade.
Oh, wow.
And he sent me pictures from videos from the parade, and I was
like, cool. Yeah.
So brave for going to that parade. I would have been
not me. Yeah. That's not me. The parade sounds like the worst thing in the world to me.
Yeah, I'm too much into true crime, and I'm watching the news, and
I know.
It was actually a nice celebration. It looked like a lot of fun. My son was first he was a catcher, and then they turned him, because he's 6'4".
Oh my gosh.
He's 6'4", and being a catcher was really tough on him because
he's too tall.
Yeah, they turned him into a pitcher, and he became a really good pitcher. But that's my older son. My younger son is shorter, but he's really quick. Hey, Rachel, nice, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a little bit. We're sitting here talking about baseball, and
all the stuff.
We haven't even gotten to Matthew Perry yet, but we have some things to talk about first.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing I did want to touch on is Solo had put in the chat, and you had talked about the Delphi trial.
Yes.
That is, I got to agree with both of you. It really does. I'm so broken for these families.
I know. I know.
Because it took so long. It took I remember first coming to YouTube, and that Delphi was the case where everybody was like, justice for Abby and Libby. We have to find this was such a heartbreaking case, and it was on Valentine's Day, 2 young girls murdered, right? Bridge guy, all that whole thing. People built whole channels on this case, and then they finally thought they got this guy. Chopper, good to see you. Good to see you. They finally think they've got this guy, and it turns out he was literally psychotic. He
Right.
was psychotic when when they were getting these so-called confessions. And it really, and the judge's actions leading up to the trial were so nonsensical. And I wanted to be able to, I'm one of those people who's like, I want to believe the police and the justice system is doing the right thing. And oh yes, smash that button. Thank you very much. Hit that like button. Thank you very, very, very much. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm usually on the side of, they got the right guy. It just doesn't feel like that this time. It just doesn't. It doesn't feel
Agree.
like that this time, and I feel horrible. He's been incarcerated this entire time. When they first came out with this Odinist defense, I was like, conspiracy, conspiracy. But now it's, I don't know. It could still be a conspiracy, but and I don't think I've followed this trial as deeply as a lot of you even have. So you probably, and Solo and Chopper probably know a lot more about it than I do. But it just yeah, me too, Solo. I wanted Karen Reed found guilty because I didn't, and I'm gonna just say I'm biased because I just didn't like her, and I didn't like her movement. I thought it was a horrible movement. I'm
Me
like,
too. I
you
felt the same
asshole,
way.
you're gonna go around harassing people and want me to like her, I'm on the side of justice, and if she's not guilty, I don't want her to be found guilty. But my God, just this, like, what a bitch,
Yeah,
I'm sorry
exactly.
that word, but my God,
She's really hard to like.
she's hard to like. But I don't
Yeah.
want her to be guilty if she's not guilty, right?
Right.
But
Right. Right.
anyway, this whole situation with Delphi it stinks to high heaven, man. There's not even any DNA.
Right. Right.
There's
Yeah.
there's not even any DNA. So yeah, that's right, Rachel. For Karen with the Karen Reed trial, it wasn't even about Karen Reed anymore. It was about Turtle Boy, and it was about the corrupt police, and then the way the police acted was horrible. It was just horrible. The whole thing was horrible, and the poor victim got completely lost in that situation. Everybody did him wrong. Everybody, right? And so anyway, so it'll be really interesting to see what the jury does with the Delphi case. Does anybody? So the prosecution has rested, right? The state has rested with the Delphi trial. So now the defense will put on its case, and we'll see what happens. And gosh, how
Yeah.
heartbreaking!
I know. And we can't watch it because obviously, they're not they're not allowing video or anything in there. So we have to rely on the media and those that are in the courtroom to fill us in on what's happening.
Right.
But it's very tense. It's very tense. I wonder what's going to happen. I don't know if anyone has followed the Melody Ferris case this week.
Nope. Hey, Harlot, nice to see you. No, I have not followed it. I've only seen the headlines.
Yeah, it's been really it's been interesting, I think, because well, the storyline is just crazy. I mean, this little 100-pound woman supposedly killed her husband, dragged him up from the basement, and then put him in what they call the burn pile. So it's the big burn kind of area they use to burn stuff around the farm. And so the question is, I mean, there's no evidence that she was able to do that. And just looking at her physically, it looks impossible that she was able to do that. So the family has like completely disintegrated. Everyone's blaming each other. She's blaming her older son for being the one to actually kill him and put him on the burn pile somehow. He's a big guy. He's the the father, or the her husband, was 300 pounds, big guy.
Wow.
And the
Wow.
yeah, and the son is big. He's not that big, but he's big, and he could physically probably do it. But there's no there's no evidence. Everyone's just pointing the fingers. I think the jury is now deliberating, so
Oh,
they're at that stage. So I think we'll find out on Monday which way it goes. But it sounds like they're. My feeling is they'll probably end up finding her guilty, because there's just there's no one else to point the finger at. And there were incriminating phone calls that she had with her. She was seeing somebody on the side. The story just gets more and more crazy. But
that always seems to be the case.
yeah, I know. You could do a whole Netflix series around this. Anyway, so we'll see what happens with that one. But it was pretty interesting.
Harlot says, I've got a pit in my stomach after finding out Bridge Guy was so far away and they had to fire a bullet to get marks to match an unspent round. They'd need the marks without firing the damn thing. I'm not sure. I think I'm generally getting the grasp of what you're saying, Harlot, but you're basically saying they weren't able to really recreate what they think happened. Right. I think that's what you're saying. But anyway, the other thing with that Melody Ferris thing is, wasn't it many years ago when this supposedly happened?
Yes, I think it was. I want to say 2017.
Yeah, it was like, it's one of those things where they didn't start really investigating until long after the person went missing or died.
Right. Right.
Oh, I get what you mean, Harlot. Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying. I just wasn't totally sure. Yeah, honestly, the Boone trial, and we talked about this a little bit last week, that Boone trial was honestly quite satisfying because the jury came back so fast.
It was so good. It was so good.
And she performed so badly, and that was why that's why I isolated her testimony in my video, because it was so unbelievable, uncreditable, or it was just not. She's so without justification, so incredibly arrogant. Just no justification, just incredibly arrogant, and that's like the mark of grandiosity. And you don't. There's no reason for you to be that grandiose and that overly confident and speak so highly of yourself so many times, and wedge that overly confident speech about yourself so many times into testimony about your innocence. It's just ridiculous. Thank you very much, Rachel. I appreciate that. So and moving on to Matthew Perry. So this week was the 1-year anniversary of his death, and
Right.
I had started to see that mentioned when I was on just before I left for my road trip. I started seeing a few little things pop up, and then Cinnamon sent me an email talking about the Matthew Perry Foundation, and apparently hello Roro, nice to see you. About the Matthew Perry Foundation, which apparently I was reading up on it, had just started up right after he died.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
It
wow.
was started by his publicist, and his publicist's name is Lisa Casteller, and I recognize her name from my publicist life, because my PR journey took a few different turns. I was mostly in tech, but I spent a little bit of time adjacent to entertainment because I worked for Lucasfilm. And so, even though Lucasfilm was located around Silicon Valley, we interacted with the studios. and with a lot of publicists for the talent. And Lisa Casteller was very well known in the entertainment industry as a publicist, and she's one of the co-founders of this foundation. So I thought, just to get us into the mood and to remind us of what this is about, I'll show this video that they posted with Matthew's voice talking about what the foundation is about. So let's watch this.
I find myself thinking back through the life I've lived. Between Canada and LA, mom and dad and friends. Between sobriety and addiction, despair and gratitude, love and losing love. I close my eyes and feel such gratitude for all that I have learned in this lifetime, for the scars on my stomach, which just proved I'd live a life worth fighting for. This disease, addiction, the big terrible thing, is far too powerful for anyone to defeat alone.
It took over decades of my life, and I pray to you, if you worry that you're having this problem, or you know somebody that is, raise your hand, find somebody who's smarter than you about this, and talk to them, and be honest about it. It has nothing to do with weakness. It's a disease that we have, and we don't know that we have it. And if somebody says, just stop, you want to punch them in the face. I've said this for a long time. When I die, I don't want friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I would like to be remembered as somebody who lived well, loved well, was a seeker, and his paramount thing is that he wants to help people.
Addiction, the big terrible thing. Together, one day at a time, we can beat it down.
So, I don't think the Friends was such a huge thing. I don't think that, that's going to be the lasting legacy. People are always going to remember him first as Friends. But I do think that, writing this book and his, the way he died is going to also be a lasting legacy, a bittersweet legacy, because he did really actively try to help people, all throughout his life, but mostly at the end of his life. But he was still really actively in his addiction, fighting it when he died, while he was trying to help people. And that's true, Rachel. There are worse things to be remembered by. But he was always, as he says, also a seeker. And it's interesting because so many people, they'll reach such heights, but they still want more. They still want to be known for more. I've known so many very just insanely successful people who are just constantly striving for more. But Cinnamon, you had mentioned in your email that the foundation and the website struck you, and the tributes struck you. What were your thoughts? And there was some other information that you found as well.
Right. This video was, I think because we've been diving so deeply into this as a group here, and I've been thinking about it a lot, just the key, kind of the key takeaways from, this book and how he's written it, but the struggles with addiction, all the impact on his relationships, the professional pressure that he put himself under, but also added to the addiction, his addiction struggles, and also the other part of it was just how emotional emotionally vulnerable he seemed, along the way. So when I saw this, I thought it was very well done, by the way, as a foundation. But the video it really, I mean, I got teary when you were playing it because you hear his voice, and I think at the top of the website it says, when I die, or something like that, I want to be remembered for, not for friends. Yes, that when I die, I want helping others to be the first thing that's mentioned. It's as you say, it's very bittersweet, and So I thought it was very well done, and I love that they're doing this.
The whole idea of, there's a lot of mentions in the book about, I was on the verge of death, or, I thought I was going to die. And then, it's just so impactful because now we know he did die.
Yes.
And that was how he died,
Yes, I
and
know.
now there are people criminally charged for it. And some people have pled guilty. And we've seen, interviews with Keith Morrison where he's like, yeah, we're angry. We're angry at the roles that, were being played. And, adjacent to all of this, we're seeing this enormous culture of just systematic drug abuse and people pushing drugs on people to get their way in Hollywood and the entertainment industry, like with the whole Diddy thing. And there's, another case with Chris Brown. I watched the Chris Brown documentary where similar allegations, including one where a woman was actually assaulted on Diddy's boat around Chris Brown's, by Chris Brown. It's just like there's an entire systemic culture around getting people addicted so they're helpless,
Yes.
and controllable, and it's criminal. And I like that this is all being opened up and talked about, but it's also so heartbreaking. And that's one of the whole points of my channel, is that, maybe it's uncomfortable to talk about this stuff, but it's important so that we don't fall into any of its traps.
Right. Right.
So with that, why don't we move forward with our reading? And I'm going to have you start with
Alrighty.
this interlude called Trauma Camp.
I will tell you up front that it's a bit of a short chapter this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll make a real-time decision when we're done with this chapter about whether we will continue on.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right. Interlude, Trauma Camp. There is such a thing as Trauma Camp. And yes, I've attended. And yes, I made up that name. It was in Florida. Where else? And I spent 90 days there, opening up the trauma of my life and reliving it scene by scene. I did it in a group setting. Others reciprocated their traumas until everyone was fainting and puking and shaking. At one point, I was asked to draw the stick figures of all my traumas, and then asked to show everyone what I'd drawn and describe it. As I tried to point to one of the drawings, my fingers started to shake, and subsequently my whole body joined in, and it wouldn't stop shaking for 36 days. I was like a goat who'd had a close encounter with a bear. The bear was gone, but the goat kept shaking. At the end of trauma therapy, once you've gone back into the trauma and relived it, the therapists are supposed to close you back up. Basically, you're supposed to feel everything and release it and learn how to make it a story, not a living thing in your soul, so that it no longer has dominion over you in the way that it did. Oh, and you're supposed to cry. They didn't close me up right, and I didn't cry. I was afraid. I felt like I was back on stage. Being famous in rehab isn't perhaps what you imagine. Everyone else there has a lot to deal with, so who cares if you're...
I'm here. Hold on just a second. Okay. If you're Matthew Perry. Later in Pennsylvania, I attended a rehab with 6 other people who were all in their 70s, including Debbie, aka the bane of my existence. Debbie was the only other smoker, so I had to see Debbie all the time outside, and Debbie had zero memory. Wait, have we met? She'd say. That's funny. No, Debbie, we have not. But I was on the show Friends once. That's probably how you know me. Oh, I like that show, Debbie would say. 5 minutes later, Debbie would pause, sucking on her cigarette, and turn to me. So, did we go to high school together? No, Debbie, I'd say, as kindly as I could muster. You are 27 years older than me. You probably recognize me from the show Friends. Oh, I like that show, Debbie would repeat, and the whole cycle would begin again. Next.
Chapter 9. Three's not company. 3 ruins everything. When a man or woman asks me to help them quit drinking, and I do so, watching as the light slowly comes back into their eyes, that's all God to me. And even though I have a relationship with God, and I'm so often grateful despite everything, I sometimes do want to tell God to go fuck himself for making my road so hard. When I'm clean and sober, it is as if a light has been shown to me, one that I can share with a desperate man who needs help with stopping drinking. It's the same light that hits the ocean in a bright sunlight, the beautiful gold water glistening. That's what God is to me. It also works at night when the moonlight hits the water. Boom. It almost knocks me over because, like that 5-year-old boy flying across a continent alone, seeing the city lights of Los Angeles, and he knows he is about to be parented, well, it's all the same. Why is it so hard for me to stay sober when I see my fellows seemingly doing it easily? Why has my road been so racked with difficulty? Why have I wrestled so hard with life? Why has reality been an acquired taste, and why has it been so hard for me to acquire it? But when I help that one man to get sober, or even help thousands get sober in a weekend at a retreat or conference, all these...
I'm here, sorry. All these questions get washed away. It's like I'm standing under a Hawaiian waterfall getting drenched by the beautiful warm water. That's where God is. You're just going to have to trust me on that. I'm no saint. None of us are. But once you have been at death's door and you don't die, you would think you would be bathed in relief and gratitude. But that isn't it at all. Instead, you look at the difficult road ahead of you to get better, and you are pissed. Something else happens too. You are plagued by this nagging question: why have I been spared? The other 4 people on the ECMO machine were still dead. There had to be a reason. Part of the answer for me was my 10,000 hours of experience in AA and helping people get sober. That lights me up, loans me, in fact, a little bit of that golden light from my kitchen. But there has to be more, God. Why did you spare me? I'm ready. Give me the direction and I will follow it. When Woody Allen asks this very question to an alien in the movie Stardust Memories, the alien responds, "Tell funnier jokes." But that can't be it. Either way, I'm ready, and I seek the answer every day. I am a seeker. I seek God. My love life, however, is a different story. I have made more mistakes in my love life than Elizabeth Taylor. I am a romantic, passionate person. I have longed for love. It's a yearning in me that I cannot fully explain. Once I reached my 40s, the rules have changed. I had done all the sleeping with people I'd ever need to do. I was looking for a partner now, a teammate, someone to share my life with. Also, I have always loved kids. I think it's because I was 10 years old when my sister Caitlin, next page,
was born. Then came Emily, then Will, and then finally Madeline. I loved playing with them all, babysitting them, playing dumb games with them. There is no greater sound on the face of the planet than a child's laughter. So by the time my 40s were in full swing, I truly wanted a girlfriend, someone I could count on, and who, in turn, could count on me. One night, some friends and I were out celebrating that yet again I had achieved a year of sobriety. My still good friend David Pressman introduced me to his girlfriend's sister, Laura. We'd all gone to a Dodgers game together, but for me, there was no game, no stadium, no hot dog vendors. Instead, the world had receded to a beautiful face under a baseball cap. I tried to pull out the old Perry charm, anything to make her notice me, but she was too busy parading her glorious personality and wit to others. She was unimpressed that I had been Chandler, and though she was perfectly pleasant to me, I sensed there was no there for her. As I drove home that night, I gave myself a speech. Yes, you're disappointed, but not every girl is not going to like you, Maddie. I let it go, but I didn't forget her. Surely our paths would cross again. And they did. This time, the group had decided to play ping pong at the Standard Hotel in downtown LA. Now, I am no Forrest Gump, but I knew my way around a ping pong table. In fact, if you've seen the finale of season 9 of Friends, you'll know that I'm at least good enough to beat Paul Rudd. I had heard that Laura might make an appearance, so I played ping pong with one eye on the door.
I'm right here. And there she was, finally. It was as if she had been hurled into my club by a tornado. She was all energy and jokes. Everyone in here should kill themselves, Laura said, and boom, like a brick of interest slamming into my face. But this time I was ready. So began a night that resembled a knife fight, only with jokes. It turned out that the new object of my affection was a stand-up comedian and a successful writer in TV. It was clear from the get-go that we would never run out of things to say to each other. Our first date was on New Year's Eve. A friend was holding a pajama party, and I invited Laura to go with me. After that, our relationship developed slowly. She was careful, and I was willing to do whatever it took, but our affections deepened. It was all good. But nothing is all good in my world, remember? Enter Rome. I was 2 years sober and thriving in AA, healthy, sponsoring people, writing a TV show. I was happy, even pretty muscular, dare I say. I dare. I'd been hitting the gym and everything. I was asked to share my story at an AA meeting in West Hollywood, and you're not allowed to say no to an AA request. The room was, that's not totally true, but you shouldn't. It's not morally okay. And you're not allowed to say no to an AA request. The room was packed, standing room only. I think word had gotten out that I was speaking. My story at the time had not reached the depths of the first few years. So as well as detailing everything I'd gone through, I was also able to get my share of laughs. At one point, I looked over to the kitchen area and noticed a woman pop her head through the window hatch thingy, leaning on her elbows to prop herself up. She resembled a gorgeous porcelain doll and was staggeringly beautiful. All of a sudden, there were only 2 people in the room. My AA share became directed only at Rome. It ended up being one of the greatest shares I'd ever given because this epic beauty, next page,
was so captivating that I wanted her to know everything about me. I wanted her to know everything. Afterward, as we all gathered outside for a cigarette, we started talking and flirting. So, what are you up to right now? She said. I'm going to go home and to write. All of a sudden, I've become a writer, I said. Well, Rome said, I make an excellent muse. I'll bet you do, I said, then turned and walked away, completely bowled over by this mysterious person. On the way home, I gave myself a talking to. But what about Laura? Yes, of course, wonderful Laura, who I am falling for more and more each day. But now there is Rome. What is a fella to do? Forget about Rome and continue investigating this Laura thing that is going so well, right? That's what a normal person does under these circumstances. But Rome had cast a spell on me. Despite my positive self-talk, this was when I made a crucial killing mistake. I didn't know it was a mistake at the time. Do any of us know that we are making mistakes while we are making them? If we did, perhaps we wouldn't make them. The mistake was this, and it was a doozy. I began dating both women. This is not a move I recommend under any circumstances, but especially if you were me. I told myself that because I had not told either Laura or Rome that we were in a relationship, I was not being an asshole. But there was a little piece of me that knew I was doing something untoward because I cared about both of them. And despite outward appearances, I genuinely didn't want anyone to get hurt, including me. So Laura and I would go to King's games together, laugh, and
I'm right here. Have a wonderful time through somewhat chaste. The courtship with both of them went slowly, but eventually both removed their sex embargoes, and I was now fully involved with two different women at the same time. It was amazing and completely baffling and crazy making. Did I mention that I had fallen madly in love with both of them? I didn't think it was even possible to do that. I even went online, read a few articles, and learned that this was something that did indeed happen. The feelings I had for both of these women were real, according to what I read. Then Laura and I pronounced ourselves boyfriend and girlfriend. Rome and I, not so much, but I was still in trouble. What was I going to do? I enjoyed both my time with both of them equally. I enjoyed my time with both of them equally. I loved them. This went on for about 6 months before I came to my senses and I decided I had to pick one. I had to stop this nonsense and pick one. Rome was passionate, erotic, funny, smart, but she also seemed to have this fascination with death that confused me. Laura talked about movies and lighter things. There was a sense of being home with her that I had not felt with Rome. I chose Laura. I made the very difficult call to Rome. At first, she was chill about it until she wasn't, subsequently screaming at me for 2 hours in the parking lot of Barney's Beanery on Santa Monica Boulevard. I know exactly where that is. When I tried to make amends, you would be hard pressed to find an angrier person than she was with me that day. But by now, you know me. You know I can't do with getting closer and closer to someone. And that was what was happening with Laura. The fear was burrowing into me. To break up with Laura would be insane. She had it all. We had it all. We were each other's best friend. But the next page.
Intimacy was scaring me. I knew once again that if she got to know me any better, she would see what I already believed about myself. As ever, I wasn't enough. I didn't matter. Soon she would see this for herself and she would leave me. That would annihilate me and I would never recover. There was another option. I could remain in the relationship but turn back to drugs and try to maintain a low habit. This would protect me from the fear, allow me to drop my walls and become even more intimate with her. Turning to drugs has led to nothing but chaos for me. And yet, inconceivably, I chose to do it one more time to deal with the Laura situation. I started taking one pill a day just in order to stay in the relationship.
Oh, God.
It worked out great at first, but as is the way with drugs, they always win. 6 months later, we had a shitstorm on our hands. I was a mess. Laura broke up with me, and I had to go on Suboxone once again and check into a sober living house. I was afraid I was going to die yet again. Rome was still yelling at me every chance she had, and Laura was hurt and worried, and gone. Oh, there was something else the magazine said about being in love with two people at the same time. It always has the same ending. You lose them both. So there I was, living in a Malibu sober living house on 8 milligrams of Suboxone. Though it's a solid detox drug, the best, as I've said over and over, it is the hardest drug on the planet to get off. In fact, it made me suicidal to come off it. That's not quite accurate. I had suicidal feelings, but I also knew it was just the medicine, so I wasn't actually suicidal, if you follow. All I had to do was stave off the days when I felt suicidal, not do anything
About it, and know that at some point I would feel better and not want to kill myself anymore. To get off Suboxone, you have to drop a milligram a week until you get to 0. Doing so makes you feel insanely sick for 2 days. Then you get used to the new level, in this case, 7 milligrams. And once you stabilize, then you drop again. The suicidal feelings don't start until you get down to 2 milligrams. So at 2 milligrams, I did probably the most selfish thing I have ever done in my life. I was terrified about how I was about to feel, and I didn't want to go through it alone. Accordingly, oh my God, I purchased $300 worth of flowers, drove to Laura's house, and begged her to take me back. He is an incredibly selfish guy. We sat on the couch in her living room and discussed the ins and outs of what this would mean. Driven completely by fear, I told her I wanted to marry her, possibly even have a child with her. And then something impossible happened. As we were sitting there, I heard a key slowly turning in her front door, and in walked Rome. In walked who now? How was it possible that these two women were standing in the same room? I would give anything to have a time machine, go back to that moment and say, how about a threesome? But this was no time for jokes. My jaw was on the floor. I'm going to have to water the plants, Rome said, and she headed up the back stairwell and was gone. I think I need to take care of her, Laura said, and left me in the living room. When I realized she wasn't coming back, I took my 2 milligram addiction back to Malibu. It turned out that Rome and Laura had met at an AA meeting, realized who they were, and become fast
Friends. The bulk of their conversations, as I'm sure you can imagine, were about what an asshole I was. As for me, I couldn't stay in Los Angeles, so I hopped on a private plane to a Colorado recovery center where they said that they thought that they could get me off Suboxone without making me feel suicidal. Well, so much for that idea. I felt suicidal for 36 days in a row and then flew to New York and appeared on Letterman, trying to hide that I was being held up with tape and paper. Somehow, I pulled it off. 7 years later, after I learned a whole lot about myself, I made real amends to Rome and Laura, and they both accepted my apology. Believe it or not, the three of us are friends now. Laura is married to a lovely guy named Jordan, and Rome is living with an equally lovely guy named Eric. Recently, the five of us had dinner together at my place, and we all had a lovely time. Then, at around 10 p.m., the two couples left in their respective cars. I heard the engines recede down the canyon toward the city. Out back, as I waited for something to come to me, anything that might make things better, instead I once again heard the sound of coyotes. No, it's the sound of me, alone, fending off the demons for one more night. They'd won, and I knew I'd lost as I headed back up to my lonely bedroom to fend off those demons and negotiate sleep one more time.
Wow. I'm cool with continuing to push through another chapter. Are you?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
So, but I did want to say, man, like sometimes it's hard to have sympathy for him. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have sympathy for him, but I don't it's not all the way through me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because he does over and over and over and over again make the active choice. Like what because I'm a person who has struggled with very similar addictions. Sometimes Rachel's like, shut up, Lynn. You're being too soft, Lynn. I am a very soft person. I will admit it. I've spent my life being a little bit of a pushover. I'm not gonna lie. I am very compassionate, unfortunately, but oh man, this guy over and over and over again, he makes the choice, even though he's already gotten it together. And I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to make that choice and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You are very nice, Rachel. You are very nice, but and I think it has, it has come back to bite me many times because I've wanted to give that person the benefit of the doubt and they fucking, stab me right in the back. But I always know it's not a personal thing. It's a them thing. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's hard to feel that and know that in the moment.
Yeah.
Because it feels, such a betrayal when something happens like that. And I think for Matthew, it was the easy choice for him. Go back to the drugs, something to make him feel better in the moment. And even though he worked so hard to be sober, you can see in his writings, it's like he has this, horrible choice to make in his mind. And it's like, well, I'm just going to take a pill,
Yeah.
and it's an easy out. It staves off the pain and, keeps me going for whatever, right? But it's like he says, the drugs always win.
We've talked about how when you have all the money in the world, it's hard to resist going out and buying all that shit that you can have to, to stave off, you think that you have all the power in the world to, but at the same time, when you have all that money in the world, you also have all the tools at your disposal to not go to the addiction. You know what I'm saying? And
Or go to the addiction, because I think it's, for him, it was, well, I'll just go back into rehab. It's not a big deal. I have the money to do it. I can fly on a private plane to any rehab, center in the United States if I want to, and they'll take care of me, and I have the money to do it. I thought about this week, if he was just a normal person, not a big celebrity, and didn't have all the money at his disposal, how would this go?
Right. I mean, if he didn't have all the money at his disposal, they wouldn't have gout, over medicated him with ketamine.
Right.
He
right.
might have found it some other way. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
So at least he did have the platform to tell the story, and then he had the platform to where now people are paying attention to the fact that this happens.
Right.
You know what I mean? So but it is, he, to me, I understand, Rachel, why you say, he's just not likable to me. To me, he's likable, but he's likable in a very complex way. Like, I don't know him, so I don't know him personally. The character that he put out there is likable to me, but at the same time, I hate users. Maybe hate's a strong word. I despise people who use people. I really do. I have no room for that. And he is such a fucking user. That really bothers me about him as a human being. I don't like that he just picked up and used people over and over and over and over again. But that's another Hollywood feature. It really is. That was another thing that when I was at Lucasfilm that sent me running back to the tech industry. Not that they don't use people in the tech industry. It's just a much different. I was used to the way people are used in the tech industry. It's almost like, you're going to be used in the tech industry. Here's just how we're going to do it. In Hollywood, they pretend they're not using you, but they're using you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
They fake to your face that they're not using you and they're your friend, but they are using you. In tech, it's just like, okay, what's the transaction? Here's the transaction. We're just, openly using each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does absolutely. It does. It makes sense to me.
You're in tech, yeah.
And, for a while I was in the gaming industry. So while it was still tech, it was very close to entertainment, of course. Right. And so, I worked with all the game studios, EA and Activision, and a lot of them were, a lot of them had either sports celebrities or Hollywood celebrities participating right in the games. And so I didn't have the same experience you did, but Lucas was like one of the companies that we worked with. And so I saw just a glimpse of that. Not like you have, but I saw just a glimpse of it. And I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It was too much for me.
Yeah. So they were literally to your face, be like, oh
yeah.
And then
stab you in the back on the way home.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, we shall begin the next. I'm supposed to read now,
I think
right?
you're up. Yeah, you're up.
All right. Interlude. Violence in Hollywood. Okay. I'm not a violent man, but I have been both the victim and the perpetrator of violence one one time each in my life. Oh, great. Now he's violent. Years ago, right after she quit seeing Justin Timberlake, I got set up on a date with Cameron Diaz. At the time, I was working out a lot and had developed big arms. For the date, I prepared accordingly, taking a long walk. Oh my gosh. I'm getting like something about Mary vibes. Okay. For the date, I prepared accordingly, taking a long walk with my sleeves rolled to my shoulders so that my guns were appropriately tanned. Pro tip, this helps them look even bigger. Yes, I literally tanned my arms for this date. I am sort of picturing Cameron Diaz reading this and cringing, right? The date was at a dinner party with a bunch of other people, but upon seeing me, Cameron got almost instantly stoned. It was clear that she wasn't interested in me at all, but the party went on nevertheless. And at one point, we were all playing a game, Pictionary, I think. As she was drawing, I said something witty to Cameron, to which she said, "Oh, come on," and proceeded to punch me in the shoulder. Or at least that's what she meant to do. But she missed and instead punched me smack in the side of my face. Are you fucking kidding me?
Sorry.
They didn't like that punch in the face. Are you fucking kidding me? I said, realizing I'd just been punched in the face by Cameron Diaz and my big arms hadn't helped at all. Next page.
This was about 15 years ago, but she'll probably call me, don't you think? Then there was this other time. In 2004, I flew out to Chris Everett's tennis academy in Florida for a charity event, the Chris Everett Bank of America Pro Celebrity Tennis Classic. It was a veritable who's who in Hollywood, but I was most interested in Chevy Chase. Chevy had long been a hero of mine. In fact, his performance in the movie Fletch had changed my life forever. One chilly night in LA, my best buddy, Matt Andre, and I went to see a preview screening of Fletch, and at one point we were literally rolling in the aisles with laughter. Chevy must have had 300 jokes in that movie, and he landed each one perfectly. Later, as Matt and I sat at the bus stop awaiting our ride home, I vividly remember turning to him and very seriously saying, "Matt, I am going to talk that way for the rest of my life," and I have, which makes this next story particularly painful for both Chevy and me, possibly more for Chevy. Anyway, at the charity ball the night before the tennis event, Chevy walked up to me and said, "I just want you to know I'm a big fan." This was incredible. I said, "Oh my God, all I do is steal from you." And we went on to have a mutually complimentary and quite lovely conversation. Next day, it was time to play tennis. Now, my skills were by this point admittedly rusty. I hadn't played in years, and my ground strokes needed a lot of work. What I did have, though, was an incredibly hard serve. In fact, they had a speed clock at the tournament, and I punched in at 111 miles per hour. The only problem was I was not exactly sure where they were
going. Was fine at your everyday public court, not so fine in front of 2,000 people. Even former President George H.W. Bush was there. The game begins. I am first up to serve. I have my partner in the ad court, and on the opposite side is Chevy, also in the ad court near the net, and his partner back at the baseline, to whom I would be serving directly. I toss up the ball, bring my racket around my back, hammer the tennis ball as hard as possible, and watch in horror as instead of it spearing across court to Chevy's partner, it goes directly straight and it's heading for Chevy Chase. He is standing on the service line, which is exactly 60 feet from where I've hit the ball. This line is coincidentally the exact distance from the mound to home plate in baseball. So I can confidently tell you that if the ball was hit at about 100 miles per hour, this means it was traveling at about 146.7 feet per second, meaning Mr. Chase had 0.412 seconds to get out of the way. Mr. Chase did not get out of the way. More precisely, his testicles did not get out of the way. I have just served something close to professional speed serve right into his Chevy Chases. if you know what I mean. Here's what happened next. Chevy made a face just like the one he makes in Fletch when a doctor gives him a prostate exam, and then dropped to the ground. Remember, all this was going down in front of 2,000 people. Event now over. It took 4 medics to dash onto the court, strap him to a gurney, and rush him to the nearest hospital. If this is what I do to my heroes, Michael Keaton and Steve Martin better take cover. And thus concludes the violent section of this book. I was a little fearful that he had actually harmed somebody like on purpose. Okay, so
Right.
Next page, and here's the real chapter.
Okay, chapter 10, The Big Terrible Thing. Imagine this. You have to walk back onto a set where you have almost literally shat the bed for weeks before. You've been out of it, slurring lines, making bad decisions. You're in New York City, and even though you have not one but 2 sober companions, you call room service at the hotel, your voice shaking, detoxing, and say, "Please put a bottle of vodka in the bathtub of my room." Yes, the bathtub. Hide it in there. And then when the day is done, you head back to that fucking hotel room and you drink the bottle of vodka. And you finally feel all right again for maybe 3 hours, and then have to do it all over again the next day. You're shaking, pretending that you are not in very serious trouble whenever you talk to anyone. Using that same shaky voice, you call the hotel and tell them to do the vodka bottle in the bathtub thing again. This is perhaps something that a normie, what we addicts call all you lucky non-alcoholics, might always struggle to understand. I'll take a stab at explaining it. When you drink an entire bottle of vodka, you are extremely sick the following day. Having a few drinks in the morning helps, but I was the lead in a giant studio movie, so I could not drink in the morning. You are sick and trembling, and it feels like every part of your insides
is trying to squeeze out of your body. And that's all day, the entire 14-hour day. The only way to fix how sick you are is to drink the exact same amount or a little more the following night. So just don't drink, says the normie. We alcoholics feel like we will literally go insane if we don't drink. Not to mention the alcoholic will be even sicker and look sicker if he doesn't drink the bottle. But what about the movie? Doesn't matter. Oh, sorry. Quiet, Steve. But what doesn't matter. I have to drink. How about taking a break for the night? Not possible. Next question. So I'm in Dallas. I'm on methadone, a quart of vodka a day, cocaine, and Xanax. Every day I would show up to set, pass out in my chair, wake up to do a scene, stumble to set, then just basically scream into a camera for 2 minutes. Then it was back to my chair for further nap time. At this point in my life, I was one of the most famous people in the world. In fact, I was being burned by the white hot flame of fame. Therefore, no one dared to say anything about this horrific behavior. Oh, that's just awful. The movie people wanted the film to be completed, slap my name on a poster, and make $60 million. And Friends, well, Friends was even worse. No one wanted to mess with that money-making machine. At one point during the filming of Serving Sarah, I thought maybe some Valium would help me somehow. A doctor arrived at my duplex hotel room to give me some. The night before he came to visit, I had drunk a party-sized bottle of vodka, the one with the handle on it. When the doctor looked around the room, he saw the bottle and said in a nervous voice, "Did you drink all of that?" Next page.
Yes, I said, I may have the Valium every 4 hours, or may I have the Valium every 4 hours, not every 6? With that, he turned tail and ran top speed down the spiral staircase and out the door, presumably so he wouldn't actually be in the room if Matthew Perry died. But I went away to rehab after Jamie Tarsis had told me I was disappearing and eventually came back to finish the movie. This was me during Serving Sarah. I was a mess. I felt so guilty and I apologized to everybody. And I like to think that I did a great job for the final 13 days of shooting. Everyone tried to be kind about it and they were doing their best, but they were pissed off. The director was pissed off. I'd ruined his movie. Elizabeth Hurley, my co-star, was pissed off. She never got to do another movie either. I needed to make real amends. That's part of what AA teaches you. So I re-recorded my slurred parts for the entire movie, which meant I looped the entire movie, days and days in a sound studio. 3 beeps in a studio, and I'd say my line to match my mouth. I happened to be good at that, and at the very least, we got the slurring out of the movie. Then I committed to doing the most press possible in the history of press, bending over backwards to make things right. I was on the cover of everything, on every talk show you can think of. Of course, the movie tanked anyway. I was paid $3.5 million to do the movie, and I got sued for the shutdown, even though it was a health issue. At the mediation table, a team of insurance flacks faced me down, so I just wrote them a check for $650,000. I remember thinking, man, no one taught me the rules of life. I was a complete mess of a person, selfish and narcissistic. Everything had to be about me, and I
Match that with a really handy inferiority complex, an almost fatal combo. I was all about myself, you think, from the time I was 10 years old. From that moment when I looked around and said, it's every man for himself, I had to be so focused on me just to keep myself together. But AA will teach you this is no way to live. One of the things you do in the 12 steps of AA is create a personal moral inventory. It's the 4th step. In it, you write down all the people that you're mad at and why. I had 68 names, 68. Then you write down how it has affected you, and then you read it to someone. This is step 5. What I learned from this process, and by the care and love of a great sponsor to whom I read my list, was that I wasn't the center of the universe. It's kind of a relief learning that. There were other people around who had needs and cares and were just as important as I was. If you're shaking your head now, go on, have at it. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Sobriety had now become the most important thing in my life because I learned that if you put anything in front of sobriety, you will lose that anything anyway if you drink. I read my list to my sponsor one beautiful spring day at a wonderful meditation center in Los Angeles called the Self-Realization Fellowship Lake Shrine. Perched on a hill overlooking the Pacific, it's beautiful. I've been there. The place is truly peaceful. There's a lake and gardens and temples and even a pot of some Mahatma Gandhi's ashes, the only such stash outside of India. As I finished reading out my list, we realized the wedding was starting in the gardens. I watched as the couple beamed at each other, the families in their best attires and efficient smiling, waiting to warble on about. Next page.
Sickness and health till death do they part. I hadn't been there for anyone for so long, my addiction being my best friend and my evil friend and my punisher and my lover all in one. My big, terrible thing. But that day, up there with the view, there always has to be a view, of course, and with the soon-to-be newlyweds and Gandhi somewhere nearby, I sensed an awakening that I was here for more than this big, terrible thing, that I could help people, love them, because of how far down the scale I had gone. I had a story to tell, a story that could really help people, and helping others had become the answer for me. On July 19th, 2018, the New York Times front page featured stories about Donald Trump, Google, Putin's election meddling, and Maria Butina, a Russian agent who, according to the headline, had used sex in a covert plan. I knew none of this, nor would I know anything for the next 2 weeks. Not that El Chapo got life plus 30 years, not that some 19-year-old shot 3 people dead and himself at a garlic festival in Gilroy, California. I remember that. Not that Boris Johnson became the UK Prime Minister. When I awoke from my coma, I was screaming. My mother was there. I asked her what had happened. She told me my colon had exploded. It's amazing that you're alive, she said. Your resiliency is incredible. And with some life changes, you're going to be okay. And they can remove the colostomy bag in about 9 months. I thought, I have a colostomy bag? That's great. Girls find that to be a definite turn on. I said, "Thank you very much."
After that, I rolled over and really didn't talk or move for 2 weeks. I had been inches from death because of something that I had done. I was attached to 50 machines and I would have to learn to walk again. I hated myself. I had almost killed myself. The shame, the loneliness, the regret were too much to handle. I just lay there trying to deal with all of it, but there was no dealing with it. It had already been done. I was afraid to die, which was in direct opposition to my actions. But it was over. The Matthew Perry show canceled by opiates. Sometimes I could sort of pay attention to what was going on in the room, but that was about it. I certainly wasn't taking part in anything. My best friends, Chris and Brian Murray, would come visit. About 3 weeks into it, Maria, my sister on my father's side, came to see me. Are you ready to hear what happened? She said. I nodded, barely. After your colon exploded, they put you on a ventilator, which you vomited into. So all of this bile and septic shit went into your lungs. They put you on an ECMO machine. Somehow you survived that, and you were in a coma for 14 days. After that, I don't think I spoke for another week because I had realized that my greatest fear had come true, which is that I did this to myself. There was one upside, though. A 14-day coma makes it very simple to quit smoking. I had been on opiates and off opiates and back on different opiates for so long that I suffered from a situation that only a subset of the population gets. Opiates cause constipation. It's kind of poetic. I was so full of shit, it almost killed me. Also, I now had a bowel situation.
The last thing I said to Aaron before the coma, as I was spinning on the ground in pain, right before I lost consciousness, was, "Don't leave me." I meant right then and there, but she, like the rest of my friends and family, took it literally. Aaron pulled the night shift for 5 months in that hospital. I often look back on that time and am so grateful that this happened before COVID, because then I would have been alone in that room for 5 months. As it was, I was never alone in that room once. That was God's love in human form, made flesh. Both my mom and I are experts in a crisis now. What I've always wanted to tell her is that the little show called Friends and all the other shows and movies, I essentially did it all for her attention. And yet, that's the one person whose attention I did not really get from Friends. She mentioned it on occasion, but she was never boiling with pride about what her son had accomplished. But I don't think there's possibly a way that she could have been proud enough for what I needed. And if you're going to blame your parents for the bad stuff, you also have to give them credit for the good stuff. All the good stuff. I could never have played Chandler if my mother weren't my mother. I would never have made 80 million if my mother weren't my mother, because Chandler was just a hider of true pain. What better character for a sitcom? To just make a joke about everything so we don't have to talk about anything real. That's how Chandler started. In the initial breakdown of the show, Chandler was supposed to be an observer of other people's lives. So he would be the guy who, at the end of a scene, would make some joke, comment on whatever has just
Happened. The fool and King Lear speaking truth where there had been none. But everyone ended up liking Chandler so much that he morphed into being his own major character, that he ended up superseding what I actually did in real life, getting married, having kids. Well, some things I can't talk about all that well. The bottom line is, I abandoned my mother at 15, just as she'd been abandoned by my father. I was not an easy child to put up with, and she was just a child herself. She always did her best and was with me in my hospital room for 5 months after the coma. When your colon explodes because of overuse of opiates, the prudent thing to do is to not ask for opiates to solve the situation, which is, of course, what I did. And they gave them to me. I was impossibly depressed and, as always, wanted to feel better. Also, the hole in my stomach, the one that you could fit a bowling ball in, was ample excuse to get pain medication. Just so you are following along, I had come within inches of dying because of opiates, and I had asked doctors to solve that problem with opiates. So no, Even after the catastrophic event, I was not done. You think? I hadn't learned anything I still wanted to use. When I got out of the hospital after the explosion, I was actually looking really good. I'd lost a lot of weight, but I was so injured that they couldn't do surgery to replace the bag for at least another 9 months. So I went home to my apartment, lied to everyone about the severity of the pain to get pain medication. I was not actually in pain. Oh, you asshole. It was more annoyance than pain, but doctors believed the lie and gave me tons of opiates. And obviously, I started smoking again. Next page.
And that was kind of my life. And let's not forget that colostomy bag was constantly breaking regularly, 50 times at least, leaving me with shit all over me. Dear colostomy bag people, make a bag that doesn't break, you fucking morons. Did I make you laugh on Friends? If so, don't put shit all over my face. When an addict takes a pill, they feel euphoric. But after a short while, the pill doesn't make them euphoric anymore because a tolerance is built up. But the addict still really, really wants to feel euphoric again, so they take two instead to get the feeling that one originally gave them. Then two is not enough, and they go to three. In the past, I had played that little game until the number got up to 55 pills a day. Just watch the second half of season 3 of Friends. I was so frail and sick. I was so frail and skinny and sick. It definitely showed, but no one said anything about it. The UCLA hospital was giving me opiates for my fake stomach pain, but I needed more, so I called a drug dealer. But I was on the 40th floor of that building in Century City, and that meant I had to figure out a way to go down 40 floors, give the dealer the money in an empty cigarette packet, and get my pills. Then I had to get back to the 40th floor unnoticed, take the pills, and I would get to feel good for a while. Now I had to do this with a sober companion, a nurse, and Aaron, all living in the apartment. Turns out I was terrible at it. I tried 4 times and got caught exactly 4 times. The UCLA doctors were not pleased with this and said I had to go to rehab. I had no choice. I was addicted to everything they gave me. Had I just said, no, fuck off, it might have
been a glorious moment, but the drugs would stop and I would get crazy sick. I was put in the rather strange position of choosing where I'd be locked up for months, given the choice of New York or Houston. Maybe somebody more capable than me should be given that decision. I, being the least qualified to make any decisions, picked New York. I was high as a kite and fakely clutching my stomach when we arrived at the recovery center in New York. Even though the place resembled a prison, the people in there were all smiles. What the fuck are you guys so happy about? I said. I had a tendency to be a bit grumpy. I was on 14 milligrams of Ativan and 60 milligrams of OxyContin. I had a colostomy bag. I asked where I could smoke and was told there would be no smoking here. I can't stay here if I can't smoke, I said. Well, you can't smoke here. Yeah, I heard what you said. How in the world am I supposed to quit smoking on top of everything else? We'll give you a patch. Don't blame me if I smoke the actual fucking patch, I said. It was agreed that they would keep me on the Ativan, put me on Suboxone, and I could smoke during the detox, but not when I was on the main unit. This meant that I could smoke for 4 more days. When I wanted to smoke, the staff member would escort me outside and stand next to me while I puffed away. That was relaxing. 3 nights went by and I met a very pretty, extremely smart nurse. She took very good care of me and I flirted with her as much as you can flirt with someone who is changing your colostomy bag on the reg. Next.
The dreaded day where I would have to quit smoking was looming, so I was allowed to walk out with the wonderful nurse to get coffee. Accordingly, my mood lifted a bit. I made jokes, I flirted, in that we're all in rehab so nothing can really happen way, and we returned. Back at the center, the nurse said, I need you to do something for me. Whatever you need, I said. I need you to stop trying to fuck the hot nurse. She was referring to herself. Jesus, I thought we were both flirting in a safe, never going to happen way, I said. I was there for 4 more months and I never flirted with her again, nor did she flirt back at my non-flirting perhaps because she'd seen me covered in my own shit multiple times. I moved up to the unit, met therapists, Bruce, Wendy, whatever, whom I wanted nothing to do with. All I wanted to do was smoke, or talk about smoking, or smoke while talking about smoking. Everyone just looked like a giant cigarette. I rarely left my room. The bag kept breaking. I called my mother and I asked her to come save me. She said that I would smoke if I left and that would be awful for the coming surgery. I called my therapist, begged her to get me out. She said the same thing my mom had. I was fucked and stuck. Panic set in. My bag was full. I was not high. There was nothing separating me from me. I felt like a little kid scared of monsters in the dark. But was I the monster? I found that stairwell. The nurse, nowhere to be found. Therapy, fuck therapy. I hit those walls with my head just as hard as Jimmy Connors used to hit his
Forehands down the line. Lots of topspin. Right on the fucking line. Stairwells. I'm this close to dying every day. I don't have another sobriety in me. If I went out, I would never be able to come back. And if I went out, I would go out hard. I would have to go out hard because my tolerance is so high. Oh, this is chilling. It's not like the Amy Winehouse story where she was sober for a while and then the first drink she had killed her. She said something in that documentary that is true for me. She had just won a Grammy and she said to a friend, I can't enjoy this unless I'm drunk. The idea of being famous, the idea of being rich, the idea of being me, I can't enjoy any of it unless I'm high. And I can't think of love without wanting to be high. I lack the spiritual connection that protects me from these feelings. That's why I'm a seeker. The first time I reached 55 pills a day, like the character of Betsy Malum in Dope Sick, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know that I was addicted. I'm one of the most famous people who went to rehab and people knew about it. In 1997, I was on the #1 TV show in America and went to rehab, and it was on the cover of the magazines, but I had no idea what was happening to me. Betsy Malum in Dope Sick graduates to heroin, and it's sayonara. You see her just kind of nod out, smile, and die. But that smile is a feeling that I want all the time. She must have felt so good, but it killed her. But that beatific moment is something I still seek. Only without the death part. Only without the death part. I want a connection. I want that connection to
something bigger than me because I'm convinced it's the only thing that will truly save my life. I don't want to die. I'm scared to die. I'm not even any good at finding the drugs. Somebody at one point that I worked with introduced me to a crooked doctor. I would claim that I had migraine headaches. Actually, I had maybe 8 doctors going for my made-up migraines, and I would still sit through a 45-minute MRI to get drugs. Sometimes when things were really bad, I go to drug dealer houses. The nurse of the doctor took over from him when he died. She had all the pills, and she lived in the valley. And whenever I wanted to get pills, I would go to see her. I'd be terrified the entire time. She'd say, "Come in." "No," I'd shout. "We're going to get arrested. Just take the money and let me get out of here." Later, sorry, I hope my dogs aren't too loud in the background.
No, it's fine.
Okay, good. Later, she wanted me to sit and do coke with her. I'd get the pills, and because I was so terrified, I'd take 3 instantly and drive home and be high to take the edge off the fear, which just meant I was even more arrestable. Much later, when I lived in Century City, I tried to find excuses to go down 40 stories to score. I was so sick and so injured at the time, my stomach hadn't closed yet. I was alone during COVID. I had a nurse on staff giving me drugs, but I wasn't getting high from them anymore. So I would call a drug dealer and get more oxy. This way, I'd have additional drugs to the ones I'd been prescribed so that I could actually feel them. The street pills were something like $75 per pill, so I was giving the guy $3,000 at a time, many times a week.
Mm.
But I got caught more times than I was able to pull it off. The UCLA doctor in charge of my case got fed up with me and told me he wouldn't help me anymore.
I couldn't really blame him. Everybody was terrified about fentanyl being in the pills and me dying from them. When I got to the treatment center, sure enough, I tested positive for fentanyl. This disease, the big, horrible thing, addiction, has ruined so much of my life, it's not funny. It's ruined relationships. It's ruined the day-to-day process of being me. I have a friend who doesn't have any money, lives in a rent-controlled apartment, never made it as an actor, has diabetes, is constantly worried about money, doesn't work, and I would trade places with him in a second. In fact, I would give up all the money, all the fame, all the stuff to live in a rent-controlled apartment. I'd trade being worried about money all the time to not have this disease, this addiction. Wow. And not only do I have the disease, but I also have it bad. I have it as bad as you can have it. In fact, it backs to the wall all the time. It's going to kill me. I'm sorry. That's me pausing at him saying that. It's going to kill me. I guess something has to. Robert Downey Jr., talking about his own addiction, once said, "It's like I have to have a gun in my mouth with my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of the metal. I got it. I understand that, even on the good days. When I'm sober and I'm looking forward, it's still with me all the time. There's still a gun. Fortunately, I guess, there's not enough opiates in the world to make me high anymore. I have a very, very, very low bottom. Things have to get truly awful. They have to get big and terrible before I quit anything. When I was doing the show, Mr. Sunshine, I was basically running it, writing it, starring in it. Then at home, I was working on notes for a writer on a script that he had written. I had a bottle of vodka next to me. I made myself 13, 14 drinks, but homemade drinks. So triples. And
After the 14th drink, I wasn't drunk anymore, so I quit drinking. I think now I'm at the point with opiates where it's the same situation. There are just not enough. I took 1,800 milligrams of opiates in Switzerland per day and wasn't high. So what am I going to do? Call a drug dealer and ask for all the drugs? Now, when I think about OxyContin, my mind flashes directly to having a colostomy bag for life, which is something I could not handle. That's why I think it'll be pretty easy for me to continue being off opiates. They don't work anymore. And I could wake up from another surgery. There have already been 14 since the first one with an irreversible colostomy bag. It's time to figure something else out. As said, the next level is heroin, and I won't go there. Me quitting drinking and opiates doesn't have anything to do with strength, by the way. It just doesn't work anymore. If somebody came into my house right now and said, "Here's 100 milligrams of Oxy," I'd say, "It's not enough." The problem remains, though. I'm there wherever I go. I bring along the problems and the darkness and the shit, so every time I leave a rehab, I do a geographic and buy a new fucking house, and then I live in it. And the first thing I used to do when I looked at houses, which is a hobby of mine, was go through the homeowners' medicine cabinets to see if they had any pills I could purloin. You can't be a dick about it, though. You have to take the right amount. You can't take too many or they'll know for sure. So you check the date on the pill bottle. You want something that's sort of out of date. If it's been a long time out of date, you could take a bunch of them. But if it's brand new, you could take only a couple. I would hit 5 open houses on a Sunday. That'd be my whole day.
unbelievable. He was hitting open houses for people's drugs. At one point, when I was taking 55 a day, I would wake up and somehow have to find those 55 pills. It was like a full-time job. My whole life was math. I needed 8 to get home. Then I'd be there for 3 hours, so I need 4 more. And then I have to go to that dinner party, so I need 7 for that. And all this to just maintain, to not be sick, to avoid the inevitable, which is the detox. I imagine those homeowners arriving back after their open house and eventually at some point opening their medicine cabinet. Is it possible that Chandler? No, not Chandler. Surely not Chandler Bing. Now, instead of open houses, I'm having one built. I started the process because about 18 months ago, I couldn't complete a sentence. Things got so flat, so awful for me. Doctors came in, my mother came in, everybody came in to take care of me because I couldn't talk. I was so out of it, I had to do something. I had that 20 million penthouse apartment in Century City where I was doing drugs and watching TV and having sex with my girlfriend of a few months. One night I was passed out and she was passed out. And when we woke up, my mother and Keith Morrison were at the foot of my bed. I thought, am I in an episode of Dateline? And if I am, why is my mother also in it? My mother looked at my girlfriend and said, I think it's time for you to leave. This saved my life. My dad has saved my life multiple times too. When he helped me get my Marina Del Rey after Jamie Tarsis had told me I was disappearing before her very
eyes, I was deathly afraid that I would never have fun again for the rest of my life. After about 3 weeks, I called Marta Kaufman and David Crane to tell them I was sober and could return to friends. When are you coming back? They said. We need you to come back. It's going to be very work intensive. We have to start in 2 weeks or we won't be able to do it. But I was still very sick. My father had overheard the tenor of the conversation and called Marta and David back. I will pull him off your television show, Dad said, if you continue to act this way around him. I was so grateful for him for being my dad and doing the dad thing, but I also didn't want to be the problem. They were just doing their job. They had the #1 hit TV show, and 2 of the main characters were about to get married. I couldn't just disappear. I just wanted everything to be okay. So then I was moving from Marina Del Rey to Promises in Malibu and was told I was going to need more than 28 days. I would need months to get better from this. 2 weeks later, I was driven to the set of Friends by a technician from Malibu. When I arrived, Jen Aniston said, I've been mad at you. Honey, I said, if you knew what I'd been through, you would not be mad at me. With that, we hugged and I got the work done. I married Monica and got driven back to the treatment center at the height of my highest point in Friends, the highest point in my career, the iconic moment on the iconic show in a pickup truck helmed by a sober technician. Not all the lights were green on Sunset that night, let me tell you.
I can't be useful in a relationship because I'm both trying to hang on and in so much fear that I'll be left. And that fear is not even real because in my 53 years and with all the wonderful girlfriends I've had, I've only been left once many years back. You would think this would be outweighed by all the others I left, yet she was everything to me. The smart man in me sees it clearly, though. She was only 25, just trying to have a good time. We dated for a few months, but I let all my walls down. I decided once and for all just to be myself. And then she dumped me. She had never promised me anything. I was drinking like a maniac too, and I don't blame her. I had to see her at a play reading a couple of years ago. She played my wife. How are you? She said before the reading, and I pretended I was fine, but I was in hell. Get out of here. Get out of there. Do not engage, I thought. Just pretend everything's okay. I have a couple of kids with my partner now, she said, and life is good. Are you with anybody? No, I said. I'm still looking. I wish I hadn't said that because it made it sound like I was still looking ever since she dumped me, but it's true. I'm still looking. Then the play reading ended and she was no longer my wife, and I got the hell out of there, and she still looked exactly the same. These days, I have faith in God, but too often that faith seems, well, blocked. But then everything is blocked by the medication I'm on.
These days, too, I ask this question, am I blocking my relationship with a higher power by taking Suboxone? One of my big problems, and the reason that I've had so much trouble getting sober over the years, is I've never let myself feel uncomfortable long enough to have a spiritual connection. So I fix it with pills and alcohol before God can jump in and fix me. I did a breath work class recently. For half an hour, you breathe in this very intense, very uncomfortable way. You cry, you see things, you kind of feel high. For me, it's a freebie high, the best kind. But the Suboxone even blocks that feeling. Half the doctors I speak to say I should be on Suboxone for at least a year, but probably the rest of my life. Other doctors tell me I'm not technically sober while I'm still on it. It's very difficult to get all the way off it either way, which is ironic because it's a drug used to get you off other drugs. Recently, when I was hooked up to an IV of it, the dosage I was receiving was zero point 0.5, lower than it was supposed to be, and it got me so sick and scared I had to bump it back up. You feel terrible when you stop taking it. When you take heroin, the drug hits your opiate receptors, and then you are high, and then it fades and you're not hitting the opiate receptors anymore. Then you're sober for a while, and then maybe the next day you hit your opiate receptors again, and then you're high, and on and on. But Suboxone works differently, wrapping itself around the receptor, and it doesn't go away, which means it's basically damaging your receptors 24/7. So, one of the theories that I have about my struggle with happiness is that I've damaged these receptors. My dopamine gets replaced by the Suboxone. The dopamine hit is what you get when you enjoy something, like looking at a sunset or playing tennis, and you make a
good shot, or you hear a song you love. But I'm pretty sure my opiate receptors are very seriously damaged, possibly to the point of no return. That's why I'm always a little bummed. Just like pancreatitis, maybe if I left my opioid receptors alone for an extended period, they'd fix themselves and I'd be happy again. I've seen God in my kitchen, of all places, so I know there's something bigger than me. I know I can't make a plant for a start. I know it's an omnipresent love and acceptance that means that everything's going to be okay. I know something happens when you die. I know you have I know you move on to something wonderful. Alcoholics and addicts like myself want to drink for the sole purpose of feeling better. Well, wah! You know what? Can you keep reading? Because there's actually a delivery at my door. I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. Let's see, where did she stop? Let's see.
Start it. I've seen God in my kitchen.
Okay, I've seen God in my kitchen of all places, so I know there's something bigger than me. I know I can't make a plant for a start. I know it's an omnipresent love and acceptance that means that everything's going to be okay. I know something happens when you die. I know you move on to something wonderful. Alcoholics and addicts like myself want to drink for the sole purpose of feeling better. Well, that's at least true for me. All I ever wanted was to feel better. I didn't feel good. I had a couple of drinks and I felt better. But as the disease progresses, it takes more and more and more and more and more and more and more to feel better. If you puncture the membrane of sobriety, alcoholism kicks in and goes, "Hey, remember me? Nice to see you again. Now give me just as much as you did last time, or I'll kill you or make you crazy." And then the obsession of my mind kicks in, and I can't stop thinking about feeling better. Matched with a phenomenon of craving, and what you're left with is a bruise that starts off one way and it never gets better. Nobody has a drinking problem and then stops and drinks socially, and it's fine. The disease just picks up. The big book says that alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful, but I would also add that it's patient. As soon as you raise your hand and say, "I'm having a,"
I'm here. Thank you. Problem. It's as though addiction says, well, if you're going to be so stupid as to say something about it, I'll go away for a while. I'll be in a rehab for 3 months and think, well, I'm going to use when I get out of here, but I can wait for 9 days to do it. The disease is just drumming its fingers. In AA, it's often said that when you're in a meeting, your disease is doing one-armed push-ups outside, just waiting for you to leave. I've almost died several times. And the lower you get down the scale, death is as low as it goes, FYI, the more people you can help. So when my life is firing on all cylinders, I have folks I sponsor, people calling me to help them with their lives. The 2 years from 2001 to 2003 were two of the happiest of my life. I was helping people, sober, strong. There were other good side effects of sobriety. I was also single for some of it. So I'd go to clubs, but I didn't want to drink. The miracle had happened for me. And let me tell you, no one is popular at 2 a.m. in a club. No one is more popular at 2 a.m. in a club than a sober guy who says, "Hi, how are you?" to a woman. I don't think I've ever gotten laid more than those 2 years. Jeez, man. But the disease is patient. You slowly stop going to all the meetings you're supposed to go to. I don't really need to go to the one in Friday on a Friday night. And then by the time you're deep into that kind of thinking, alcoholism is coming for you. Baffling and powerful and patient. Suddenly, you're not going to any meetings anymore, and you've convinced yourself that you understand it all. Now, I don't need to do this anymore. I get it. Addicts are not bad people. We're just people who are trying to feel better, but we have this disease. When I feel bad, I think, give me something that makes me feel better. It's as simple as that. I would still love to drink and take
drugs, but because of the consequences, I don't, because I'm so late stage that it would kill me. Recently, my mother told me she was proud of me. I'd written a movie and she'd read it. I'd been wanting her to say that my whole life. When I pointed this out, she said, "What about a little forgiveness?" "I do forgive you," I said. "I do." I wonder if she can forgive me for everything I've put her through. If a selfish, lazy fuck like myself can change, then anyone can. No secret gets worse just because it has been told. At least at this point in my life, the words of gratitude pour out of me because I should be dead, and yet somehow I am not. There must be a reason for that. It's simply too hard for me to understand if there isn't. I don't believe in half-assing things anymore. The path of least resistance is boring and scars are interesting. They tell an honest story and they are proof that a battle was fought, and in my case, hard won. I have many scars now. The first time I took my shirt off in my bathroom after returning from the hospital after my first surgery, I burst into tears. I was so disturbed by it. I thought my life was over. After about half an hour, I got my shit together enough to call my drug dealer, who proceeded to ask me what was wrong, like he was a social worker or a priest, not a drug dealer. 3 days ago, I had my 14th surgery. It's 4 years later. I cried again. I should learn to get used to
it, though, because there will always be more surgeries. I will never be done. I will always have the bowels of a man in his 90s. In fact, I've never not cried after a surgery, not once. I've stopped calling the drug dealers, though. There are so many scars on my stomach that all I need to do is look down to know that I've been through a war, a self-inflicted war. Once at some Hollywood function, shirts allowed, nay, insisted on, in fact, thank God, Martin Sheen turned to me and said, "Do you know what St. Peter says to everyone who tries to get into heaven?" When I looked blankly, the man who once was president said, "Peter says, don't you have any scars?" And when the most would respond proudly, "Well, no, I don't," Peter says, "Why not? Was there nothing worth fighting for?" Martin Sheen, like Pacino, Sean Penn, Ellen DeGeneres, Kevin Bacon, Chevy Chase, Robert De Niro, these are all fellow members of the famous club I've encountered, an informal little thing you join when you're in an airport or at a function and someone also famous comes up and says hi like we know each other. The scars, though, the scars. My stomach looks like a topographical map of China, and they fucking hurt. Sadly, these days, my body just laughs at 30 milligrams of OxyContin. Oral meds don't work at all. The only thing that helps is a little bit is IV medication, and I obviously can't take that at home. So off I go back to the hospital. In January 2022, I had a 6-inch incision with metal staples. This is the life of someone who's been blessed with a big, terrible thing, and they aren't letting me smoke. It'll be a good day if I get through it not smoking and nothing crazy happens. When I don't smoke, I gain weight too. Recently I gained so much weight
that when I looked in a mirror, I thought someone was following me. When you get sober, you gain weight. When you quit smoking, you gain weight. Those are the rules. As for me, I would trade places with each and every one of my friends, Pressman, Bierko, any of them, because none of them had the big, terrible thing to deal with. None of them had battled their entire lives with a brain that was built to kill them. I would give it all up to not have that. No one believes this, but it's true. My life is no longer on fire, though. Dare I say it, throughout all this turmoil, I have grown up. I am more real, more genuine. I don't need to leave the people in a room screaming in laughter. I just need to stand up straight and leave the room. And hopefully not walk directly into the closet. It's a calmer me now, a more genuine me, a more capable me. Sure, there's a chance that if I want a good role in a movie, I'd have to write it now. But I can do that too. I am enough. I am more than enough, and I don't need to put on a show anymore. I have made my mark. Now it's time to sit back and enjoy it and find true love and a real life, not one that is run on fear. I am me, and that should be enough. It always has been enough. I was the one who didn't get that, and now I do. I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a person, and a good one at that. I want good things for myself and others, and I can continue to work for these things. There is a reason I'm still here, and figuring out why is the task that has been put in front of me. And it will be revealed. There is no rush, no desperation. Just the fact that I am here and I care about people is the answer. Now, when I wake up,
Curious, wondering what the world has in store for me, and I for it. And that's enough to go on. I want to keep learning. I want to keep teaching. Those are the grand hopes I have for myself. But in the meantime, I want to laugh and have a good time with my friends. I want to make love to a woman I am madly in love with. I want to become a father and make my, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. And make my mother proud, my mother and my father proud. I love art now too. And have started collecting. I got my Banksy painting at an auction in New York. I bought it via the phone. I've never met him, but I want him to know that if there was ever a fire, my Banksy would be the thing I'd say. I wonder if he'd care. Actually, he'd probably set the fire to it himself. I've accomplished a lot in my life, but there is still so much left to do, which daily excites me. I was a kid from Canada. I'm such a
you want
sap.
me, you want me
No,
to
no,
read?
no, I'm fine. I'm
Okay.
fine. Sorry if it's hard to hear me.
No, you're fine.
I was a kid from Canada who had all his dreams come true. They were just the wrong dreams. And instead of giving up, I changed and found new dreams. I keep finding them all the time. They're right there in the new, in the view, in the valley, on the edgings and flashes that bounce off the ocean when the sun hits. Sorry. Just so. When someone does something nice for someone else, I see God, but you can't give away something you don't have. So I try to improve myself every day. When those moments come and I'm needed, I've worked out my shit and do what we are all here for, which is simply to help other people. Ooh, so it sounds like there's another interlude. Is there another chapter after the interlude?
I think there's one more chapter and then we're done.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll do that for next week. That
Yep.
kind of sounded like the end, but the reason I'm getting so emotional is just, like I have such complicated feelings for Matthew Perry at this point. You know what I mean? He's a complicated person. He's a selfish bastard. He was a womanizer. He's a little immature baby, but he had reasons for all that. And this book, to be, in 12-step programs, we're very much encouraged to journal, write out our feelings, write it down, he talks a lot about, making amends in your inventory. And, you learn that as you write things down, you really do learn more about yourself. And I almost feel like the exercise of writing this book was kind of that for him. But he was able to, get it edited into a format that was his story, to help other people. But it was also him, like, encouraging himself to go on in that format. It was almost like him telling his sobriety story to himself so that he would stay sober, because he was still hanging on by a fucking thread.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And thank you, Rachel. I have so much empathy for him, because it struck me as we were reading about his intense struggle with addiction. There were people in the chat talking about their struggle with tobacco addiction, right? People, and I very much identify with that. I've had every addiction under the sun, except I've never gone into opiates. Thank fucking God. Okay. I am so grateful that I never had an opiate addiction, because I know what it's like to struggle with addiction. And I can only imagine how much more intense it is to be addicted to opiates, because knowing how difficult it is to quit smoking, because I've quit smoking cold turkey, and it was so hard. And then, and I quit drinking and doing drugs cold turkey. It was so fucking hard. And then you have to change your entire way of thinking, and you can't just quit those things cold turkey, especially drugs and alcohol. Smoking is one thing. Smoking doesn't tend to change it doesn't tend to make you insane and do things, because it's a more accepted way. It doesn't change your behavior. You know what I mean? But you're so funny, Rachel. You're fine. But anyway, but if you just take the idea of how hard it can be to quit smoking, and then multiply that by 5,000 times with an entire way, with the entire way that people look at you, and your change in behavior, and the fact that you might have had to steal from people to support your addiction, lie to people to support your addiction, change your entire moral fabric to support your addiction. Some people, you know what I mean? It's so much more. It's so much deeper. And so I empathize with people, but I also understand that when you have the tools to get through it and to not fall back into the addiction, and you have a reason to move forward, you should. You know what I mean? And somebody in the chat earlier said something like, maybe that is the key. He constantly was seeking for that spiritual connection, and he didn't have it. And for me, I think that is a lot of this. The 12-step programs are founded on that entire idea of finding a higher power, something bigger than yourself. A lot of times what that has to be is a true love for yourself. And there isn't enough of an emphasis on finding a true love for yourself, such that we end up looking for that love and affection and adoration outside of ourselves. And social media is one way we do it. And then other ways we try to find that wholeness is by doing, engaging in addictions. And of course, alcohol and drugs is another outlet, and eating is another outlet, and relationships, sex is another outlet. And if we were taught how to deal, how to process our emotions in a healthy way, how to how to process our emotions in a way that we didn't need to find a way to cover them up or escape from them. So much of this, we wouldn't even we wouldn't have to fund a war on drugs. You know what I'm saying? Or it wouldn't have to be so big. That's all. That's where I'm going with this. It's just, and it just makes me super emotional to know that he was still active. Matthew Perry was still actively doing all the things that he's talking about while he was writing the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I have, I have a lot of mixed feelings. And like I said, I've been thinking about this since we started. And part of the reason I think that I'm here, I think I mentioned this early on, is that I grew up in an alcoholic family. And so I was on the other side of this. You can sort of see like the casualties along the way that Matthew has with all of his friends and people that he loved who, ended up leaving him or not being in a relationship with him, and the pain it caused him. And, my mother was the alcoholic, and she was a bad alcoholic. She was belligerent when she got drunk. She was, when Matthew said he would have the party size vodka, delivered, that was, my mother did that. I mean, she would drink that much a day.
I'm so
And
sorry.
yeah, it was a really, there's so many mixed feelings. I mean, she eventually stopped drinking, but she was a dry drunk. So the issues that she had, that when she was drinking, I thought, of course, if she stopped drinking, then everything would be okay, but it wasn't. There was so much pain. I mean, she had, she was abused sexually as a child by her own uncle, which I didn't find out until almost before she passed away, which was years and years ago.
Yeah.
But, I think about how it's affected me. And I was never an addict, but I think I had a sort of addictive traits. So, right. And always wanting to make it okay, always wanting to rewrite the script so things would be okay.
Yeah.
And part of the healing process for me was becoming a parent and really trying hard to be a good mom to my boys. And I think for the most part that worked out okay. But I will say that even now, the shame that I still feel of growing up in an alcoholic family and not knowing what I was going to come home to. From school, I couldn't bring my friends home because I never knew if my mother was going to be drunk or if she had men over, or there were, so many things, right? And you think, well, that was so many years ago. It was, long, long time ago, Cindy, I'm Cinnamon. That, by now in your life, it should be mostly healed, but, you carry it with you. And I think it just becomes part of you and how your lens of the world. And I think in some ways, although this has been kind of painful for me to go through, I think it's also part of just healing, and I think being with all of you here has been really, really good. And thank you for, being here.
No, thank you.
And
Thank you for lending your beautiful voice to this. No, and I feel silly for getting so emotional. I just
No. I think it's, the thing about it is that this story, I think, touches us all in a different way. And one of the reasons why we're all here for different reasons. But, Lynn, you're so genuine, I think. And the emotion is real. And, don't try and push it down. Let's just acknowledge it. I think we all feel a little emotional, and you're just helping us feel it a little bit more, which is good.
thank you. And I think it's also just, there's so much familiarity in the book, in the story, because of the locations. He's talking about Barney's Beanery and
I know, same for me.
yeah, and being on in Hollywood and different places in Hollywood. But the other thing is that he's attracted to a lot of the same things as me. Like I love tennis. My mom and I were avid tennis watchers. So, he talks a lot about tennis. But the other thing that he and I both have very much in common is this need to see the ocean and the view of the ocean. And when he talked about, just like this peace that he gets when he sees the view of the ocean and looking out upon it, it's a connection, and he's a complicated guy. He makes me mad in many respects, but from what I can tell, he's never done a horrible thing to somebody. From what I can tell, he's never art anybody or assaulted anybody intentionally, except for hitting Chevy Chase in the balls with a very fast um most of his bad behavior is stocked up to addiction and also being a selfish Hollywood star that acts the way selfish Hollywood stars do. um he's a complicated guy, and not always likable, but did put together a very likable character on a very beloved show. And then I do feel that even though he actively participated in his addiction over and over and over again, he was also actively scammed, and preyed upon by unethical doctors.
Right.
And I'm glad that they were charged and that there's going to be some sort of justice there. So I think we can endeavor to finish next week.
Yes.
Right. Because we're pretty much almost done, and we should think about what our next book or project should. I was thinking we could also possibly do a like a documentary watch. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
There's some really good documentaries on right now. We could, separately watch the documentary and come and talk about it. Because we won't be able to watch the documentary on here. We'll get copyright struck. But
Right.
I just watched the documentary about whatchamacallit. Well, the Menendez brother documentary is really good.
So good.
It's really good. And also the Chris Brown documentary is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not as good as the Menendez brothers one, but it's pretty good. There's a few of them. So we'll talk about it and think about it. Just send me, you in the chat, send me suggestions of books or documentaries that we can talk about together. I want to keep this weekend thing going. And I'm also thinking about my next, I had not followed the Micah Miller case. Is it Micah Miller or Micah Miller?
I haven't followed it either.
I had not followed it, but I had noticed that there was a lot of talk about it, a few months ago, about this pastor whose wife had allegedly committed suicide, but a bunch of people were questioning whether he killed her.
I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. This is a good one.
Yeah, his home was just raided. His home was just raided. So now I'm really interested in seeing what everybody was talking about. So I might look into that for my next video on this channel, but I have not settled quite yet on what my next video is going to be. If anyone has any suggestions, let me know.
Are there any good trials coming up?
Good question. I'm kind of saving myself a little bit for the next Lori Vallow trial, which is going to be next year.
And she wants to represent herself.
Yes.
What the heck?
That
It's like
lady,
Sarah Boone. Oh my gosh, what is she thinking?
Lori Vallow is it's a horrible thing to say about such a monster. She is the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, this woman. I mean, she's just horrible. Like such. And Colby Ryan is doing an amazing thing on his channel. He's another complicated person. Colby Ryan, her son.
Yes. Oh, I didn't know about his channel.
Oh,
Uh,
yes. He has a podcast. It is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. He actually did an interview with his mom from jail.
oh my gosh.
And it shocked me. That's true. Sarah Boone never wanted to represent herself. She was told she had to because she kept firing her lawyers. And then she put out that ridiculous
The
ad.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Colby, like I'm just really impressed with what Colby is doing with his life. With what he's doing. It's like he's not like, yes, he's turning this into content, but I feel like it's in a way that is helping people understand the whole situation in a very, yeah, they quit. Right. That's true. That's true, Rachel. But anyway, they couldn't work with her. They quit. They couldn't work with her. They quit. He made her represent herself. He ordered that she represent herself, and then these other guys came up, and I'm convinced that this James Owen and the other person that represented her, they were there just for the clout. I mean, they did their jobs. They vigorously represented her, but my God, what a stupid, how ridiculous. How ridiculous. Exactly, Rachel. Like, I feel like Colby he has the right to do what he's doing, and he's not doing it in a grotesque, egregious, grifty, disgusting way. He's being so he's honoring the memories of his father and his sister and his siblings. And he's been through so much. I just can't imagine how, and he's so young and he has his own children, right? So I just really admire what he's doing, and what he's doing is actually providing a service, because he's in an extremely unique position. He's one of the few YouTubers on here who really has actively been involved in, directly involved, or in the middle of, not directly involved, because he wasn't involved in the murders, but he was inside of that whole thing, and the way he's come out of it is just very admirable. So anyway, I just thank you all for being here. Please remember to hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, look out for my videos, and be here next week with me and Cinnamon. And if you want to join us in reading, you are welcome to. And I will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.